Climate Action Advisory Committee meeting is called to order. The time is 3:09 p.m. And I'll go ahead and do a quick roll call. Tess Alvin Smith. No. Ellen Drell. Yes. Raul Gardia.
Yes.
Patrick Henschel.
Here.
Marie Jones.
Here.
Shai Larson.
Yes.
McAdam Lajowski, is that correct?
Yes, it is.
Jennifer Main. Kathy Monroe.
Here.
John Nickerson.
Present.
Michael Potts. Susan Scher.
Here.
Javier Silva.
Here.
Walter Smith.
Here.
Jade Swar.
Here.
All right, so the first item on the agenda would be discussion and possible action regarding selection of an interim chair. County Council, would you like to?
Sure. Just you're going to need a chair to perform certain functions. I don't believe that we have it on for appointment of the chair for the next year, but in the interim, there's going to be a few functions: managing the meeting, calling any special meeting if there was something urgent, etc. So, if you would like to nominate and elect a chair at this time, we can have someone that can go ahead and conduct the meeting.
So we're open to a motion. If anyone would like to move to nominate someone to be the interim chair for the meeting today.
Can I make a suggestion?
Sure.
Can we do this after introduction so we at least know who each other are?
That sounds reasonable.
Yes.
Good suggestion.
Can I add something too?
Oh, yeah, please.
So we're going to be facilitating and we'll introduce that. So you're not going to be in charge of running today's meeting, just taking care of a couple of formalities about introducing, motions or if an action needs to be done. So
With coaching from.
Yes,
County Council,
if
so
you're at all
intimidating.
uncomfortable or inexperienced in this area, I'm happy to provide some suggestion and prompting for this meeting, and whoever is the interim chair, we'd need just until there's appointment of a chair, I believe, which should follow the next meeting.
The next meeting. Okay, so we'll table that at 3A for now. For 3B would be discussion of possible action regarding Brown Act regulations and other legal requirements.
Thank you all, members of the committee. Since this is a new body, I wanted to meet with you and just talk a little bit about some basic Brown Act requirements and some other legal requirements that are going to apply to your committee. This isn't, I wasn't intending to do a full training today. I do, however, want to invite you. I'm going to have a training in January that we do for members of various boards, commissions, districts, etc. We do one on the coast, we do one inland, and we don't have a date or a location just yet, although we're expecting it's going to be a Wednesday in January for the coast. I want to invite all of you to that. We do both Brown Act and ethics. I will also say that if this committee would like me to conduct a training just for you, I'm happy to do that as well. We'll just need to agendize a meeting with enough time on the schedule for that. If I could just ask real quick, and maybe we can just do a quick straw poll, how many people, is this your first Brown Act body that you've served on? Okay, so a good portion. I'm figuring there's going to be a mix of some people who have more experience with Brown Act issues, some that have less, but I just want to run through some of the very basic concepts. There are a lot of specific rules and exceptions I'm not going to get into right now, but the basic idea behind the Brown Act is that California law requires that various types of public entities, their governing boards and certain advisory bodies that they set up have to have their meetings conducted in an open manner. They have to be open, they have to be noticed to the public so anyone can come and participate. There's a requirement as to how far in advance the notice is for a regular meeting. That's going to be an agenda posted 72 hours in advance. The agenda does need to reflect everything that the committee will be discussing and acting on during the course of that particular meeting. Additionally, there's a requirement that not just the formal meetings, but any sort of discussion of the substance If it's among a quorum of the body, will need to be as part of a public and noticed meeting as well. So just so you understand, that can create some inefficiency. People do complain that government is slow. Some of that's by design. There's a desire to be conducting ways and in a way that allows for the public to participate, for people to have a right to comment on the items before action is taken. And that also means that you might find that some of your actions are a little bit less organic than they might have been otherwise, because you do have to be noticing them in advance, and there has to be an opportunity for members of the public to participate. I want to let you know that so one of the things that can be an issue, so you do have a right to talk to other members of the committee as long as you're not talking to a quorum. However, there's what's called a serial meeting under the Brown Act, which is where less than a quorum talks, but then one of those people goes and tells someone else what the substance of that conversation was. So writings, series of, I think of it almost like a game of telephone, where there's some sort of discussion of the issues. Once you get to the point that the thoughts and opinions of a majority of the body, well, and actually we can get to that in a little bit, it's a quorum. For most bodies, a quorum is the majority, although you haven't actually drafted and had ratified bylaws just yet. So some entities do work with slightly different limits as to how many people they need to act. But once there's enough people to allow for an action to occur, that's where the requirement kicks in. And I want you to know that this requirement also applies to any sort of advisory body that you create, except for one that consists only of members of this committee and has a small scope and is less than a quorum of this committee. So if you decide to create an advisory body that you want to appoint, some technical expert to, or you want to be appointing some interested member of the public to the committee, that becomes a Brown Act body as well, and that committee then has to be meeting in the same manner as this committee, which you may find will take some time, so you want to make sure that you budget for that if you do it. If you have a committee that just consists of less than a quorum, that's what's called an ad hoc committee. It's essentially a way that you can designate who it is that's going to talk about a particular item so that you don't run into a Brown Act problem in the future. You don't accidentally have a meeting because those of you on the committee know who is on the ad hoc committee and then know who not to be talking to about the issues. So I mentioned just briefly the requirements that the meetings be public. There is what's called a closed session. You're probably not going to run into that too much, but just so you understand, the boards and committees have the ability to meet on certain specified issues in private in a way that's not open to the public. Those still have to be noticed, and they've got to fall within one of the particular statutory exceptions that are out there. Easy one to remember is if there's pending litigation, a board can meet with its attorney in a closed session to go over things that would preserve attorney-client privilege. That's not likely to be applicable to you given the scope of your mission. I just want you to be aware that when if that sort of issue does arise, we can go ahead and flag that and deal with it at that time. I also want you to be aware of a few sort of other rules that are going to be out there. You have all taken your oaths, so you understand that requirement. There are some limitations on certain types of political activities when they use county resources. So anything that's involved in an election, now this body will have an opportunity to make recommendations to the Board of Supervisors as to the Board of Supervisors legislative platform and to policy proposals that the board might decide to undertake. But anything that would be a measure that would go to the voters anything that would be for or against a particular candidate for office. The California law prevents public entities from using any sort of public resources for that. So that's not to say that you don't have a right to go out there on your personal time to make your own statements, to go out and donate or whatever, but anything that would be using any sort of county resource, county staff time, county facilities, it's something that is simply prohibited under statute. Also want to let you know that you are subject to the Political Reform Act and various conflict of interest rules. These are going to pertain primarily to conflict of interest or financial conflicts of interest. I'm not expecting a lot to come up with this body. However, I would encourage you to go ahead and participate in our ethics training, which will cover the various requirements there. It would primarily have to do if you had an issue, if there was an issue coming before you that related to a particular piece of property that you own, to a company that you had stock in, to a contract that you were personally interested in or a close family member is interested in, you might have to recuse yourself. So I'm not going to try and cover all the details of that now, but I do want to make sure that you're aware of that. And then I also want to make sure that you're aware that the Public Records Act is going to be applying to your records now regarding to anything related to the committee's business. I can pause just a moment here while we shuffle a bit. So under the California Public Records Act, sort of default proposition is that any document that a government entity creates or maintains is open to the public. There's a variety of exceptions that can come into play, but the general rule is going to be if you are communicating about business that has to do with this committee, there's a possibility that your records could be requested by a member of the public. It could be open to inspection by a member of the public. And there's actually a case just in the last few years that held that applies even if that's done on your personal device. So something that you want to be aware of is that any emails, any texts, any communication that you're getting from people that has to do with this committee or anything that you may be sending to each other about this committee or to anyone else is something that might potentially become public. So I would caution, first of all, when you write your emails, just bear that in mind. That they're the sort of thing that could be showing up in the newspaper. So you always want to make sure that you're understanding there can be a broader audience than just the person that's in that to field on your email. But also understand that if we do end up getting a request, we're going to have to work with you. There's a process that we'll go through if it ends up being on a personal device, but we have a requirement to go ahead and ask you to perform that search to provide the documents to the member of the public. Those were the key points that I wanted to touch. Are there any questions right now? Oh, please.
Yeah, and our information that we put in and what was passed by the board, we had mentioned focus groups that would be part of each of the issues that may come up in terms of climate or carbon production or climate change.
Right.
And those are going to be voluntary on the part of the public to come and go, so it may be fluid. So we wouldn't be, quote, appointing people, but I guess I want to know, would it legally be designated as appointed if they came to these meetings? And again, as long as there's less than 8 of us, right, at a focus group.
Right. So this was a question that came up, I think, during the board meeting where this was first discussed. And I think I mentioned at the time that I needed to do a little bit of additional research. I did. What I've learned is that if it is appointed, so if the members are designated by this body and it includes anyone who's not on the committee, it would need to be Brown Act compliant. That being said, you could appoint an ad hoc that would then have the ability to sort of meet with whoever they chose. It's just that the ad hoc wouldn't be, you wouldn't be able to say, okay, this person is formally a member of the committee. Ad hoc, you have to participate with them in your discussions if it's someone who's not on the Climate Action Committee. Does that make
So,
sense?
so I just want to be clear,
Yeah.
so
Yes.
do we have to officially appoint an ad hoc committee that would be, of course, less than a quorum?
Right.
And then that would be the focus group, and then the public is invited to join or be part of that?
Yes, you can conduct it in that way. And actually what I would encourage is when you get to that point where you're looking at creating ad hocs, I'm happy to help craft the language of the action in a way that is going to be Brown Act compliant.
And then if we actually ask somebody to be on that board, is that considered an appointment as opposed to someone just volunteering? I mean, they would volunteer to be on it, but if we called someone and said, we would like you to be on this focus group because of your expertise.
Then yes, it likely would. So that would likely turn it into something that would need to have noticed open meetings.
Well, I have a question about that also. If in our public outreach as members of this committee, just in our efforts to let people know what's going on and encourage people to take part, and groups form, groups of the public form a group themselves that one of us from the committee participates in. I mean, is that's not, I mean, can that just meet like any volunteer citizen committee and meet on their own schedule and in their own way?
So yes, and one thing I do want to be clear about, so you're likely going to be, the scope of this committee, you're going to be touching on some things that are going to fall, I will say, well outside the scope of county government. I'm sure there's going to be, national, state legislation, all sorts of things that, on a climate action issue that may be beyond what we're talking about in terms of what this committee really has the ability to advise on and what the Board of Supervisors would have power on. I don't want to say that you're forbidden as individuals from going out and participating in those sorts of activities. That's absolutely still permissible. You don't turn one of those bodies in a Brown Act body just by joining some private organization or anything along those lines. It's when you have something that's either appointed by this committee to advise this committee, or where you have a quorum of this committee that's participating on something that's going to be within the subject matter jurisdiction of this committee. So if you're dealing with something that this committee may be taking action on or making a recommendation on at some point in the future, as long as you've got less than a quorum and you're not formally appointing some sort of subgroup or advisory body, then that's not going to turn it into a Brown Act body. And I will say, I'm envisioning a lot of potential permutations of this. So I will offer that when and if you get to the point of starting to take some of these actions, please feel free to come to my office. We do advise a number of the county commissions, boards, committees, et cetera. I don't expect you to have a mastery of this because I talked for 10 minutes at your first meeting. I just want to be able to sort of flag the issues for you so that when these do come up, you're able to know that, oh, this is something I need to make sure that I'm doing this in the right way before taking that particular step.
I just wanted to make sure that we were clear on one other thing, and that is the whole idea of serial meetings. So if I send an email to John, and John sends an email to Ellen, and Ellen sends an email to even though it's a singular mail, if it gets around to 8 people, is that then considered a serial meeting?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, the email and email threads are one of those ways that you can very easily end up with the serial meeting if you're not careful. And one of the reasons that you appoint an ad hoc is so that you don't run into that situation, right? You know that, it's only so many of you that are working on a particular issue and that you're gonna bring it back to the full committee, and so you don't accidentally go to one person and find someone else on the ad hocs, go into another, and then end up running into that situation where you've had a full quorum of the board weighing in on something.
And you're gonna be here at future meetings too, when issues come up.
So, that's undecided at this point. I do not have direction from my board just yet. We have to look at sort of how much, in terms of county resources, we can be dedicating to have people at particular meetings. I do want to be here for the beginning, at the very least, and then we can look at where it would be helpful for me to be participating later on.
And just to point out though, as agendas, like when actual officers or chairs are formally for the rest chosen and agendas are formed, they can pass through the agenda prior to the meeting with you to say, what do we have to be careful of
Yes.
based on this agenda, or what do we need to know, correct?
And once you have appointed a chair and appointed vice chair, I would like to meet with that person and sort of help that person make sure that they're feeling particularly good about their understanding of the legal issues and processes, and for that person to be able to come to me when some of these specific questions pop up.
Yeah. And do you have a card with your contact information?
I do.
Okay, great.
And rather than try and pass it out now, just find me when we've got a break.
Perfect, thank you.
And just sort of one other thing I want to make sure that, and this is something I would normally be going over with the chair, but since we haven't elected one just yet, one thing about the Brown Act requirements is that we do have to make sure that the public gets an opportunity to comment. It's not just to view, but to provide any input to this committee before any action is taken. So as we get to each item on the agenda, you want to make sure that you give that opportunity for the public to provide any comment that they might have before you go ahead and take any action or move on to the next item. Any other questions?
So that being said, I actually failed to go to public expression before we went to, I'm not used to running a meeting, I apologize. So we do have a few people from the public that have asked us to address the committee on items that are not on the agenda, and each person will have 3 minutes to speak. So in the absence of the chair, I'll go ahead and call the first speaker, which is Pete Gang. You go ahead and step up and you'll have 3 minutes.
I don't need 3 minutes. Good afternoon, my name is Pete Gang, I'm an architect, I live in Petaluma. I have been involved pretty much this whole year in an effort to get all the municipalities in Sonoma County and the county itself to pass meaningful climate emergency resolutions. At this point, we're about halfway there. And I've been aware of the formation of this body since I first heard about it in March. And I'm just here to witness the goings-on. I think just within the last week, Petaluma had Petaluma's new Climate Action Commission had its first meeting, and they were briefed on Brown Act rules, and they're struggling with the same kinds of issues. So I just wanted to make myself available for any and all kinds of collaboration on policies, actions, initiatives, anything. Thank you.
Next we have Mr. Neil Davis. And is this your hand? Mr. Davis?
Yeah.
All right.
Good afternoon. Thanks for everything you've done. My name is Neil Davis. I'm the director of Walking Bike Mendocino, a program of North Coast Opportunities. And I really appreciate, again, all the work you've done to get us here. I came today because since it is brand new and I don't know who you all are, I wanted to let you know about a training that's coming up. I'm helping organize it. It's a community organizer training. It's about how to work on issues of conservation, social, and environmental justice. It's going to be on Friday, January 31st. They're passing around a flyer about it. Thank you. right here in Ukiah. It's a 2-day training. It's a $500 cost, but we have scholarships for virtually everybody. We wouldn't expect people to spend more than $50 if that's what, but we hope that it'll at least put in a little bit of skin in the game. The training is going to focus on a few examples of things that will be covered. Organizational skills, how to work on grassroots-driven policy change, strategic skills, how to confront organized power. And it will also talk a little bit about the difference between advocacy and lobbying. So how do you make sure that you're able to have your voice heard in the kind of advocacy and policy you're looking to do without crossing boundaries into an area that's inappropriate for a commission. This is being put on by David Hunt and Associates. They have a lot of experience with this kind of thing, and I just wanted to let you know that it's going on. And I'll stick around at least until the first break, and if you have questions, please be free. Let me know. Thank you.
Tia Tyler.
Hello, my name is Tia and I work for Grid Alternatives. We're a nonprofit based throughout the state of California. We specifically work in underserved communities to make renewable energy more accessible. We do that by installing no-cost solar systems on people's homes and offer job training. Since 2010, we've done 134 projects here in Mendocino County. And as a result, we've been able to mitigate 7,000 tons of carbon being released into our atmosphere and been able to save Mendocino County residents about $4 million in their energy bills. The reason why I'm here today is because the state of California, this is the funding we received, called SASH, has been changed. This funding comes through the CPUC, the California Public Utilities Commission, and the new program replacing it is called DAC-SASH. It's a mouthful, but it stands for Disadvantaged Communities Single Family Solar Homes. Unfortunately, this funding does not cover Mendocino County. And as a result, we are no longer to install solar systems in Mendocino County for most residents and no longer able to offer free job training for the solar industry. And so I'm here today to provide you with the information, just some stats on the impact we've had in Mendocino County, and to invite you to participate in an informational webinar. The reason why is because we have the potential to change this policy in January 2020. Unfortunately, the way they decided was not just on economic need, but also air pollution. Because the North Coast has very little compared to the Central Valley, that is why not only Mendocino County, but Humboldt and Lake County can no longer receive this funding. So with your help, we would also like to be able to change that. And then here are flyers as well. Thank you.
Anyone else that hasn't filled out a speaker card that would like to address the committee?
John McCallan, I want to thank you all for your willingness to serve on this committee. I hope it is a rewarding experience for you. You make great recommendations to the board, we implement them, and we accomplish something. And when you get to comment on Brown Act, I'll have to comment there also.
Anyone else who'd like to address the committee? Was there anyone that wanted to address the committee on item 3B, the Brown Act discussion that we had previously?
The question of how focus groups are handled, I think, is really a key to how this committee is going to function. And we have at least 2 people here who were part of the Climate Action Startup Group. And my understanding, talking with people and reading the documents that Climate Action Startup prepared, the intent was the focus groups would be operating, and you folks can correct me if I have this wrong, but they would be operating largely autonomously, although they would report to this committee and make recommendations to this committee. What the documents say is that this committee will, quote, recruit and populate the focus groups. That's not quite the same as appoint them. Each of you are supposed to serve on at least one focus group. The focus group, by the documents which the board adopted in concept, would have 3 members in order to be able to be a focus group that could vote on a recommendation. All that said, I think there's quite a few nuances there where this is kind of in between a traditionally appointed committee or a committee formed out of an appointed committee and a completely citizen-driven process. But I think the intent was for it to be as citizen-driven as possible. And I'm imagining you're a member of a focus group if you show up and say, I want to participate, and you have something to contribute. But I think those nuances and how you work that out so that we don't unnecessarily encumber the focus groups with the Brown Act is a matter that could probably be addressed in the bylaws, and the bylaws committee, providing the board approves, could work closely with county council to make sure we're both compliant with the law and hopefully true to the spirit of the documents that spell out how this committee is supposed to operate. And one more thing it says on the focus groups, they would determine their own process protocol. So, you know, I think the intent was, and again, you folks will have your chance to say, but that these focus groups would be able to operate with a wide latitude of autonomy. Thank you.
If I could just add, I'm anticipating that my board is going to be comfortable with me providing a lot of support in finding ways to make the bylaws and to address the focus group issue.
So the next item on the agenda would be the introduction of the meeting facilitators and the purpose thereof. And I'd like for them to go ahead and take it.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jen Dalton, and this is
Miles Gordon.
We are here with Kitchen Table Consulting. The county has engaged our assistants to help you with this next several meetings, or what we're calling workshops, actually, so that with the knowledge that when groups like this form, especially when it's such a large group of people who don't know each other very well, with such a, you know, shall we say, big task ahead of you and a lot of work to do, the intention is to help you get started and kind of guide along the way so that you're not spending a lot of time forming. So we're here to help with that for the next 2 workshops, and our
This one and next.
this one and next. And we really have no agenda other than to just be here to assist you in getting to a place where you can hit the ground running. Because obviously we know this is an important topic and time is of the essence. Our goals, so another thing is that we are hoping that we can do a 4-hour workshop with you all in January or February, and before this meeting ends, we'll be having a conversation about scheduling that. Hopefully at a time that works for the majority of the people. And we have our broader goals for the next 2 workshops are really to help you do some group formation, to help you understand what your operating agreements might be and the principles through which you work together, which are different than your bylaws. Thank you. It's more about how you work together as human beings, and then using the bylaws as your rules of engagement. And then really speaking more about what the goals are of this group and what your roles are within that. But today, specifically, and we know that we are at probably we're having a little less time than we would hope so we hope we're going to get through these items today. But really, we want to spend a considerable amount of time giving you an opportunity to get to know one another, so that you can understand where you come from, what your experiences are, what your expertise is that you bring to the table, and what skills you have to share with the committee as a whole. We're also going to probably not have too much time to talk about your expectations of how this is going to go, but we can understand that you all come here today with an expectation of what this committee is meant to accomplish and what your role is in that. But we were hoping to have a larger conversation, but we may have to kind of nip that one in the bud a little bit. Maybe save it for the next time. And then we're going to talk a little bit about the documents that you have to prepare you for your participation on this committee, any questions you might have, and as I mentioned already, calendaring the next workshop opportunity, which is different than your regularly scheduled meetings.
Okay. So any general questions on that? I know we've just been engaged with this beginning part, and then we're out of, then we get out once you feel like we got this. We got our officers, we know who we are, we don't need any more, but any general questions about what our role is going to be here? We don't have a specific agenda other than we live in this county and we care really about this topic, but you're all the ones who are empowered to make all the decisions. We're just helping to try and move it along. So any questions about who we are, where we're going? Yes?
I don't have a question, Miles, but before we get too much further, I'd like to make a habit of saying thank you to the public that comes to listen to what we're doing and to comment. It's very heartening to see you all here, and I'm sure the other community members are equally heartened to see you, so thank you for coming.
And just I heard somebody mention the word break, just on housekeeping, because so many people have come for so long, and we're only here for 2 hours today. There's bathrooms down to the right. If anybody needs to use it on your own time, just jump. If we take a break, I think you feel like I came all this way and we didn't really get anywhere. So if that's okay with everybody, if you need a bathroom or water, it's just down to the right as you need. So I believe we're going to move on to.
A question,
Oh, yes.
just out of curiosity in the back of my mind about bylaws and when that, because we have to do that in order for us to proceed with our work,
Right.
right? Oh, so you're gonna touch on
Yeah,
it?
we'll get to
Okay,
that.
perfect.
That'll be coming along,
Thank you.
one of those next steps, so thank you, that's a good question. So we're gonna jump into getting to know each other, and you're gonna do a lot of talking here, but I believe if I'm correct for county council, there's any public comment on us as facilitators, is that correct? We need to open it up real quick. So, moment for public comment on us being facilitators? Second, thumbs up, okay. We're gonna move on. So in your packets, and actually it's on the side, it's not in the clip, you all got something that looks like this. We're moving on to 3D here. It looks like this. Okay, so find that. And we're going to do a process here where the goal is, in order for you to draw on each other, you're all the experts in this room, where you bring in expertise in many different things. And to know who you are really well, and to know how you can work together and call on each other and start doing this, you need to start sharing that. So we really want to spend some time helping you get to know each other and doing that today, so you know who's in the room, who's good not only on their background around the topic and the content, but who's got some certain skills, like who would be better at running a meeting and who would be better at data collection, who are those? So we're going to spend some time, that's going to be our goal here. And we're going to use this as sort of a beginning capturing sheet for you. So what I want you to do for only about 3 or 4 minutes, each of you is just going to take a moment to first just kind of write your name down in that first spot, and then think about what are my relevant, I personally, bring to this as far as background knowledge and expertise. That's things like, I got a deep education in this, or I've had professional skills around this and this climate mitigation. What am I bringing to it? And then what relevant skills? That's like, hey, I'm a great note taker. I love taking notes. Or I schedule. I love scheduling. Because these are all things you're going to have to be doing, and you're going to look at these. Hey, I have a lot of skills at running meetings. That's what I do. I'm a public speaker. I'm a writer. I'm a grant writer. There's going to be funding. I do social media really well. I do accounting and finances. I'm a policy advocate. So I want you to take about 3 or 4 minutes and just think about that. And then in a minute, we're going to start sharing that individually and then as a whole group, so we can kind of capture this, who we all are, what our backgrounds are, and what skills we bring to this. So you've got kind of a general sense of who's in the room. So questions on that? So take about 3 minutes to just sort of think about yourself. And then you're not turning it in, it's not homework, so just make quick notes that you can do that in a moment. We'll tell you how we're going to start sharing that.
Oh, nice, thank you.
finishing up your agenda, you'll have a moment to start talking about it and adding to it, and just capture some ideas and start wrapping that up. So I see most people are finishing up. If you haven't, that's all right, you'll have a chance to do this. And what we're gonna do, we're gonna have a two-step process here. You gotta get to know each other here. And two pieces about that are, not only are you guys gonna be speaking about your issues, but you're gonna be needing to listen to each other a lot and share things back and hear the public. So what we'd like you to do is, I'm assuming that you're sitting next to somebody you don't generally work with or don't know well. If that's not the case, you guys know we know everything about each other, you can switch. But I'd like you, the person you're sitting next to, you're gonna give you about 6 minutes, about 3 minutes each, and I want one person first to share what they've written. Like, this is me, this is who I am, this is what I bring, this is my background, these are my skills. The other person listens, they can take a few notes about that person here, because that person who's listening is gonna tell the rest of the group about them. You're gonna introduce your person next to you and say, this is what this person brings to our group. And then, so you're gonna do about 3 minutes, you're gonna hear a bell, and by then, you should switch. And then the other person needs to talk, and you listen and take some notes. Okay, so that's what we're gonna do. We're gonna take about 6 minutes with the person next to you. Maybe you can speak with Kathy over here. We'll get out of the way. So there, maybe two. Does that work? Do you guys all not know each other well enough to talk? Two.
Well, we're gonna be one.
Okay, right. So you're gonna be right there.
Yeah,
okay?
yeah.
All right, so start. Have a nice conversation. Share that. Take some notes. Listen, one person first. It's not a conversation. It's listening, and then the next person. So only about 6 minutes. Introduce yourselves.
Very low.
And I can facilitate meetings, but not the crowd.
Right.
Our meetings are the
Sure, I read your bio, I couldn't access people's resumes.
The other person, you can start wrapping up and getting ready for the other person to
But,
introduce.
yeah, it's really interesting. Yeah. Yeah, I did a lot of hospice work for a while. Yeah, in San Francisco. It's very keeping an eye out on vulnerable
Okay, the other person should be, wrap up one person, and the other person should start talking, finish up with the first person.
I just have always been very interested in environmental issues. But yeah, you know, I have an undergraduate degree in environmental studies and a master's in environmental policy. After my master's program, during my master's program, I worked at EPA Region 2 in New York on brownfield remediation, and working a lot with communities, with poor communities to learn how to turn their the blighted areas of their cities into parks and schools and other things. And I loved the experience so much that upon graduating from my master's program, I went to Washington, D.C. I was a presidential management fellow, so I was a White House appointee. So I worked for the EPA headquarters, and I was a sector policy analyst. That job was 11 sectors of the U.S. economy. It's just very interesting. You don't have to write notes, but that partnered with the EPA. Anyway, so I worked with the EPA, and then my life took a turn, and I did some work with environmental consulting, so working on environmental impact reports and general plans, and working with communities to figure out how to revitalize their core areas. I've worked at nonprofits. Currently, for the last 4 years, I assist CEOs and board directors for environmental use associations for textile industry. Before I came in my relevant skills, I think that I really pride myself on big honesty and non-judgmental, and being able to see an opportunity for collaboration and consensus building. I'm an effective communicator both office speaking and I did a lot of public speaking when I worked at EPA all across the country, and I really loved it. At the EPA, I also was able to write hazardous waste law, so often hazardous waste policies, so I have some experience with policy writing. And in between my first and in between college and grad school, I worked for one of the insurance firms.
Okay, got about 1 more minute.
Just knowing how to create effective messaging, get the point across. And definitely leadership abilities. I think that's something that has kind of followed me in all of my decisions. No matter who I'm in the room with, who I'm at the table with, no matter where my professional experience is, not theirs, being able to really thrive and participate and understand.
I think that this is great.
Something that I still do and have done a lot of is know where we need to go, kind of the long-term vision or the short-term goals, and being able to drive it through all the opposition, all that stuff. And do it.
All right, let's start finishing up.
Yeah.
You're done. You're gonna face back up here.
I know.
Yeah, I think we're sort of trying to figure out
I know, it's nice.
Okay, we're all gonna come back together and learn about each other. Okay, great. Everybody got to dove right in, which is great. So the goal here is we're going to share with the group, but we're going to share what you heard. You're going to introduce the person next to you and tell their name, where they're from, I guess would be helpful. And then we want to be succinct here. You want to go through like, okay, this is their background, this is their skills they bring. And each of you your job is to kind of take some of your own notes on this person. So Jen will be capturing it up here, so if you didn't quite hear it, she'll have some bigger notes. But so you got sending your cheat sheet going back like, oh yeah, I need to talk to that person, or that person I need to remember for these things. So this is your cheat sheet, this is the way to go through. And I'll also point out that we're kind of modeling some things too. You're going to be doing a lot of public meetings, and everybody, God bless us all, we love to talk. And sometimes we want to go through. So this is a good way to get people to really talk, but then have them share what they heard, because that's usually a much more succinct way of hearing about people. Because you know, we could have done this one by one, but we would have been here for an hour and a half doing that. This way everybody gets to talk and we get to hear really succinctly. So think about this as kind of a way often of getting people to talk, is they talk each other in small groups and then they share out what they heard from somebody. And it's a way to think about moving through your processes. So why don't we start down on the end and introduce who you spoke to and go through kind of fairly succinctly what their background is and what some of their skills they bring into the group.
Great. Sorry, what was your last name?
Larson.
Okay. So this is Shai Larson from Albion. And Shai has always had an interest in environmental issues and environmental policy, which is what brought her to this committee. And she has a pretty, way too much to fit in right now, but a very long history of working with organizations like the EPA, right, in New York, in Washington, D.C., as well as working, for example, with poor communities, low-income communities and blighted neighborhoods, and restoring those into environmentally safe areas like parks, et cetera. She also has some background in drafting legislation, among many other things. It's a very impressive resume, I have to say. And some of her relevant skills include being an active listener and non-judgmental, and building consensus, as well as leadership in like committee settings, this kind of setting. Effective communication and messaging. She has a background in public relations. She worked at one of those PR firm. Policy writing and leadership. Yeah. That's about it.
Thank you. Jay, could you?
I missed a lot of stuff.
No, not at all. That was great. Thank you. I had the pleasure of speaking with Raul, who lives in Ukiah. And Raul is a unionizer. I didn't get the name of the exact union. I wrote down Local 2015.
SEIU.
SEIU.
Thank you. And Raul focuses in working with home care workers and in the county, and he's really experienced them when we have climate disasters as them really being on the front line of the impacts of their very vulnerable communities. So really being on the front line of these disasters and having a very strong impact on them. And so he's very passionate about working with the working poor and developing an adequate response so that they are safe and that they know what needs to happen when they're facing a disaster. And he is very interested in environmental justice, as per all of that, as well as the impact of climate on the human experience, as well as workforce development. Raul has done some work in policy advocacy, and I think he's a good public speaker just when speaking with him, but that was a skill. And of course, in his job, he's very involved in engaging with the local community, also very active listening and responding to the needs of those he's representing. Thank you.
Well, this isn't quite fair because I happen to know this gentleman sitting next to me, but I haven't seen him in 20 years, so that counts. So I will talk about Walter Smith, who's from Willits. First from his prior life and how we know each other. I am a forester, he'll probably say something about that. And I met Walter when he was working with Rainforest Alliance as a certification body. And he was working in the woods at one time. And now, for the last 20 years, though, I haven't seen much of him, and he caught me up on what he's been doing. He's been taking his certification skills overseas. He spent much of the last 20 years or so in Asia, working on chain of custody issues and working on certification issues on sustainable forestry, probably focusing a lot on FSC. I didn't ask him that, but that's where it all started, I think. He works closely with communities and companies trying to get away from existing standards for greenhouse gases and for sustainable forestry, but to work on developing policies that they can agree to and implement and then monitor and make sure that they accomplish what they said they were going to do. In terms of relevant skills, Walter is strong at standards development and at grant writing and also at managing groups.
Great, thanks. John Nickerson from Ukiah, and John started a long time ago because he told me the name of the country was Zaire, which is now the Congo, which is, he was a Peace Corps volunteer, and I'm sure on forest-related matters, and then became a forester, worked on inventory, forest inventory and long-term forest management planning for many years. Then in his third life maybe, began working with the Climate Action Registry, the Climate Action Registry, and helped develop protocols for greenhouse gas accounting, quantification, and actually was facilitated the state's protocols for the cap and trade program. He's also worked internationally with countries as well as communities in developing, again, greenhouse gas protocols and understanding greenhouse gas emissions, as well as carbon sequestration. In his life, he would read carbon reports from projects and approve them so that they could get on the registry and get paid for their, the amount of carbon they were sequestering. And he's worked also with county and at a jurisdictional level where it's done evaluation of greenhouse gas emissions from forestry, agriculture, and other resources within the county as a whole, as opposed to individual pieces. His skills, working with groups, and obviously good at giving presentations and working with the public.
This is Susan Scher. She's from Ukiah. She's a self-employed attorney, or she was a self-employed attorney. She's no longer doing that. Right now she's a mediator. She's really good at listening. She loves to write. She's been writing her whole life. So she's also tenacious, stubborn. So that made her, helped her out with becoming a member of the Climate Action Mendocino advocate. And she is a really advocate on behavior changes, and I think that that's going to be a big part of our conversation, climate change, that change what we're doing, what we've been doing. So she's developed a PowerPoint on emission, idling vehicles as a greenhouse gas contributor. And so she's lived here for 37 years in the county. Her relevant skills, I said she's a writer, she's good at communicating and public speaking. That was great.
This is Javier Silva, who is a member of the Pomo tribe in Willits, and he has 25 years experience in tribal environmental issues. He started in the water field and operated his tribe's water system, and was the tribe's first environmental director. So he's also been involved in a lot of environmental planning for the tribe, particularly in the areas of solid waste and water and forestry. And he has traditional ecological knowledge to guide this environmental program. He's an advocate for getting traditional ecological knowledge, which use the initials TEK, which was news to me, traditional ecological knowledge to other agencies outside of the tribe. And his skills are, he's good with computers. He works a lot with data, although it's not his favorite thing. And he understands geographic information systems, and he has also experience writing grants and can facilitate groups.
Kathy, you want to introduce?
Hard to keep up.
Well, we're capturing this here too. We'll
Yeah,
post it up, so
good.
if you want to like.
And
this
we'll
is-
type it up, too.
Yeah, this is the
Okay,
last
good.
step.
Okay, but I'd like to introduce Patrick Henschel. He's from Wallala. He moved up here 3 years ago. Is from the LA area. He's been in the technical data world, and he still is doing that remotely. He's particularly interested in climate change activism, and has been involved in Sunrise, and he was involved in the September 20th action for his community, helped organize that. He is going to be taking on a radio show on KZWX that's going to be once a month relating to climate action and trying to, with the goal to motivate people to act. He feels his skills or his general knowledge of technology is good. He's also in public speaking he's comfortable with, and he also keeps himself balanced with yoga. And is, recognizes that importance too.
Yeah. This is Kathy Monroe, everybody. Kathy's a long-term resident of this area since high school. This is a very personal issue for her. Back in 2017, the fire tore through the ranch that she lives on and manages now, and basically razed it to the ground. Any structure was destroyed. And that's in Redwood Valley. She's been a naturalist all her life, public school teacher, member of the California Native Plant Society, and is presently, in addition to serving here, is also a member of the Mendocino Resource Conservation District Board. She's got a lot of experience with writing educational materials, particularly for kids, but I got the sense that be a lot more than that can do. Seems like a skilled writer. And then as an aside, her son is also deeply involved in the environment, particularly the intersection it looks like between ecology and finance, and sort of, what would you say, conscious business development, ethical investing, things like that.
Well, yeah, he's involved with a group right now, Climate Neutral.
Okay. So that could be another additional asset that she'd bring to the table through her son.
Yeah, and he's anxious to be an asset.
Great, thank you.
Can I just, you're a member of the NRDC level?
Mendocino County Resource Conservation.
Oh, the Resource Conservation District in
Yeah.
Mendocino County,
Yeah.
sorry.
I was busy.
All
Right.
Thank
Okay.
you.
So I'm going to introduce Matt Lajowski. He is the Dean of Facilities at the college in Willits, and he's in, Ukiah. Dang.
It's two.
2 for 0. He's in charge of building, planning. I'm gonna have to be very careful what I say from now on. Operations. He was on the planning commission for the city of Ojai. He's a licensed contractor. He's leadership in environment and energy and environmental design, AP certified. He has a degree in social justice from Evergreen. And he is getting his master's right now in educational leadership from Cal State East Bay, which I didn't even know existed. He has a lot of experience in sustainability policy development, business, writing, policy in general. Altogether, a very cheerful and fun person to talk to.
Thank you.
This is Marie Jones. She got her degree from Cornell. I tried making an office joke, but it didn't resonate with her.
You watch TV, what they say.
She was a community development director for the city of Fort Bragg for 14 years. She got her master's degree from UC Santa Cruz. Is that correct? Is that the correct order? Or did I go back?
Undergraduate from UC Santa Cruz.
Undergrad.
I don't need to correct you.
Okay. Did a lot of work for the city of Fort Bragg as far as the general plan update, greenhouse gas reduction studies, and policy. She's done a lot of grant writing, $14 million grant writing for the city of Fort Bragg throughout her career in community development and land use planning. There was another $20 or so million in grant writing. She's obviously got a lot of experience in land use planning, law, and policy. She's good at running meetings, writings, and I think transforming data into policy, because I think that takes a lot when you're dealing with carbon reduction. That, and she's also a lead AP, although she has 7 years more experience with her designation than me. So, accredited professional.
It's basically USGDC green building. United, yeah. Yeah, green building certification. And the only thing you missed is I prepared the climate action plan for the city of Fort Bragg.
Yes. Okay, climate action plan for the city of Fort Bragg. Prepare that. Great, thank you.
Okay, I would like to introduce Tess Alban Smith, who's also from Fort Bragg. And Tess's background is as a forester. She got her forestry degree from Davis, so it included, no?
They don't give forestry degrees there.
It was a degree.
Range management master's degree.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Environmental planning is an undergrad.
Okay, all right, great. Well, it docks me for listening, right? Anyway, she has quite a resume. She worked as a forester for CDF Forester, and she worked at Jackson State Forest doing not so much the tree mensuration and cutting aspect of it, but planning campgrounds and overseeing a lot of the work that was done there. She also worked for the State Water Resources Control Board, and she worked for the California Department of Fish and Wildlife. She's very good with data, very good with computers. She can write grants. And right now, for the last, I didn't get it, how long?
I'm brand new.
Brand new on Fort Bragg City Council.
I don't represent them. Sorry, I'm here on my own dime.
Okay.
But anyway, at the urging of her friends, decided to run for city council, so she's learning the political ropes. But in terms of the nuts and bolts of seeing how agencies and departments run, she's been in on it in the middle of it, and is very confident and very competent to do all of the computing and data gathering and grant writing work. So brings lots of skills to the table.
I formed a lot of nonprofits too, so if you want help with bylaws.
Great. Yeah. Wait, Tess, you want to introduce?
Sorry?
You have to introduce.
Oh, I'm great. Done. I'm on page 1. Back on page 1. This is Ellen Drell. And Ellen has lived in Willits forever. She's been a volunteer, serious volunteer since the 70s. Mostly an advocate for wilderness areas, and was heavily involved in the Trinity and Mendocino National Forest formation as far back as the Wilderness Bill of 1984, which she reminds me was Ronald Reagan's signature on that. Don't forget CEQA too. I mean, geez. Okay. She's a huge advocate for whatever, you know, she's your person if you want an advocate. Great public speaker, organizer, and serious salesmanship experience. Did I hit it all?
Yeah, if I believe in it,
That's great, thank you. Jennifer?
To go back to page 1 also. Okay, this is Jade Swarr, and she has had a passion for climate issues since she was a kid, and she, I don't know if you're currently working for Potter Valley Tribe in environmental management. She has a degree in cultural anthropology, and she's interested in how the intersections between people and the environment. She's working on a master's in environmental management at the moment. And her skills include writing, video, communication, and working with youth.
Yeah. I'm also really into mushrooms.
And mushrooms.
Yeah. So this is Jennifer, and she's also been really interested in climate change since she was a kid. She got a biology and was it conservation studies? Environmental studies degree. She's a teacher, parent, and is very involved in youth work. She lived in an intentional community which taught her facilitation skills, and she's a builder. She was a builder there. And she's working on a climate change curriculum, and she's getting her master's in online teaching right now. Her relevant skills are making a curriculum, teaching, facilitation, grant writing, database management. Yeah, and then this is her daughter, Ananda. She's here as the youth representation. And she has made posters and animation, and she is a writer.
All right, look at you all. What do you all think? What do you guys think of this group?
Impressive, impressive, very impressive.
We need some grants.
Yeah, so it's quite an impressive group. This is obviously just the first quick introduction, but just hearing, and you all I can see, I've been jotting this down very effectively. You've got a lot of skills to draw on, a lot of background, a lot of wisdom in this group, so very exciting. Okay, so I think we're going to hold this. Obviously, there's going to be a lot more discussion. We're going to kind of move through the agenda, but I believe if I'm correct, at this point, is there public comment on this great group of people on that piece of agenda before we move on?
Hey, Miles?
Yes.
Are you gonna circulate this matrix?
Yeah, we'll type it up, the quick notes, and they can, if there's anything you were missing, yeah, we'll pass it to Carla, and then go on. So, the forward button. Yeah. So, yes, you have that. Capture.
Looks like we have time to talk about expectations, which, it's just nice to kind of share, I'm sure you all walked in here kind of with bubbling enthusiasm and some expectations of what you hope that this group will accomplish on both a long-term and short-term time frame. So we wanted to give you guys an opportunity to kind of share your personal ideas around, that topic, your expectations, your hopes. And just kind of like a brief little, we call it popcorn, just a few people who might want to share that. And we've got a couple of minutes to, I'm sorry, I'm just kind of looking at my minutes here. So the idea is really like, at the end of this work together, what do you hope will have been accomplished? Would anyone like to start? Just kind of give a sense of what you're thinking, what's bubbling up inside of you.
I've been chatting with my son about the whole idea of, the long-term goal. I mean, making a difference is really important. And since we're a rural county, we have the opportunity to not just go to carbon neutral, but to go to climate positive, and to see that we can be maybe a model for being a sponge. And to be looking at our resources in that way eventually.
Anyone else?
Oh, no.
Ellen?
Go
Sorry.
ahead.
I saw Ellen stand first, but time.
Okay, sorry. I joined because in talking with Marie and others, we had a climate action plan in Fort Bragg, but just getting through the checklist of the things that came up 12 years ago has been a real chore. And I knew that she had joined this group, and the offer came up. Pardon?
6 years ago.
6 years ago?
2012.
Oh, 2012, duh. That's 12, that was in my head. 2000. But just getting a checklist of what had been done, nobody seems interested to follow up and that sort of thing. Everybody's putting their, all their weight on this climate workshop advisory committee. And because of that, I said, well, maybe if I join this group, maybe we can get something done. I really want in the end result, I want a checklist. I want people to be able to check off that they're doing their best. we have, is it, this is the other 12. Do we have 12 years before we have serious climate change, or is it already happening? You know, that sort of thing. We need to start now, and I'd really like people to know what they can do. I don't think everybody knows what they can do, so we want to get that out there.
Ellen? I have been talking to a lot of people, and for me, I see starting at the grassroots, again, at the focus group level, the book club level that decides that they're gonna carpool to their next event and therefore refuse. I really, my immediate goal is to start seeing people from the community come together and make a little target for themselves and meet it. And I want to start adding up those targets. I'm seeing the action as bubbling up from buy-in and commitment and enthusiasm from the public, rather than creating goals and policies and then somehow having it get stuck. Because I think what we really need is, in the beginning, maybe a handful of smallish groups who are especially endowed with self-discipline or a commitment because of their friendship or commitment to each other, or because they think it'll be fun to try and achieve this goal. And I'm hoping that if we can nurture that and support it and get accolades from the supervisors for that kind of thing, it will begin to build. That's kind of how I'm seeing it. Goals, policies, those are great and we need them. But where we really get stuck, like in Fort Bragg, is, okay, let's see it, let's measure it.
Right.
Sure.
Jennifer? Yeah, I actually do think it's really important for people to feel like they can take action, but I actually think we're at a further point than small actions. I think we need big actions, and I think we need to leverage the power we have in this community to take bold actions. It's not about recycling anymore. This is about like getting windmills on the tops of the hills. It's about, we need to look at what are the top things that are actually gonna make a difference and do it. And yeah, we could be a great example for a lot of other counties and communities, but I don't think we're, like, we have to work both sides. So we have to work both the grassroots and we have to get some serious policy and action going.
Javier?
Just off that kind of, I think, so I've been involved in a lot of climate change discussions across the state. And, the first thing I like to say is, that the term climate change, I know that we need a quick pacifying issue. I think that, the real term is global pollution. And greenhouse gas emissions is not greenhouse gas, it's pollution. And I think if we start, and I know it's a fear, it's a scare, but that's what it is. And it's changed our climate, it's changed our environment. And so it's not, I know that when I first started, when I was a lot younger, it was global pollution, and then politics get in there and they say, no, we don't want that term in there anymore, we want to use it a little bit softer as climate change. And now, I'm being told that they don't like the word climate change. The federal government does not like the word climate change either. They want to, I can't remember the term, what it was going to be, or what they want to use now. In dealing with some of my partners with the other tribes up north, the Karuk tribe has also come up with a climate adaptation policy and plan that I think is something that we could also use to look at. But I think that if we really, I'm not saying change anything, I'm just saying that if in our minds, in our mindset, we're thinking pollution and not climate change, because that's what the real issue is.
How about one or two more people? Jace?
Yeah, I guess one of the expectations I would hope that this group accomplishes is recognizing the changes that are already happening and working with those, like instead of just building from the ground up, like we can see like where we can change the direction of a bigger change that's already happening, like with like the power safety shutoffs and like the changing of electricity and things like that. And and also recognizing the work that people in this county have already been doing. Because it's not really clear, like, how much people are doing.
And I saw two more hands, we might as well have you both share real quickly. Susan?
Well, I've had this personal obsession about idling vehicles, and it's been quite an education. I mean, I've learned about how idling vehicles contribute to greenhouse gases, but more importantly, when I've approached people who are sitting in their cars texting with their engines running when it's a very mild day, I generally get a blank look. And it's been very educational for me. And I don't want to be elitist or sound condescending, but I've been shocked about how little a lot of people know about how their everyday habits are contributing to greenhouse gases. And I see 40 cars lined up outside the elementary schools when parents are waiting to pick up their children. And the children, their own cherished children, are breathing in all these emissions. And these are parents who would lie down on a railroad track for their children, yet they're poisoning their children. I don't want to be overly dramatic, but it occurred to me just how we need education, community-wide education in the schools, have children come home and tell their parents what they can do to change their habits. That's only one very small aspect. There's a lot to it, but that one's been hitting me over the head.
Shai, final vision, expectation, hopes?
I would say that in my experience with always being passionate about these issues, I see that I've observed humans as being more reactive than proactive. And that when you're talking about environmental issues growing up, all throughout my life, it's like, oh, well, I have to put food on the table, I have to do this, I have to do that, I can't worry about the spotted owl. You know, and now it's like the houses are being lost, schools are being closed down, people are losing their jobs, you know, it's actually touching people. And there's this global movement of our youth, and it's this opportune moment for all of us who have been very passionate about these issues for such a long time. There's also case studies, there's other cities, there's other communities that are doing things. Chico just passed a Green New Deal of their own. So there's stuff going on, there's momentum, and so I really jumped on board, and I'm very grateful for this opportunity to be a part of this, because I think that there's only so much you can do to push, but there's momentum happening now. There's actually forward movement, and so if we can just jump on that train, I would love for us to be able to take part in the models that are happening throughout California and then throughout the country, and really show that you don't have to talk, you don't have to get, spend 6 years going down a checklist. You can actually do things and start small, get bigger, but like this is the moment. There's no more time for talking.
Great. So just in terms of that, I mean, what kind of commonalities are we seeing here around the way many of you feel about what you hope that this group is going to accomplish?
I mean, I'm here we got education, children, connect with other models, build on the momentum, leverage that. The rural county being climate positive, not just neutral. People can do their best by checking off what they can do. Do that community bottom-up, bubbling up with their own small actions, leverage the community for big actions, framing with that new terminology or using different terminologies like pollution and stuff to connect with people, and then working with the change that's already happening. And there's a lot already out there. So what are some commonalities that you're all here to do? What are you hearing?
Well, I feel like there's a lot of people here who haven't spoken yet.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just going to speak because I feel like our role is to inform the supervisors. They're the people who appointed us, and so our role should be focused on what can the county do. And part of what the county can do is educate. I think that's true. But I think we need to be focused. I think the challenge in Fort Bragg was we did a really good document, but at the end of the day, the administration was not interested in seeing it implemented. So on some level, it doesn't even matter if you get your politicians involved, your administration has to be involved too. And so on some level, we have to engage with the administration at the county level to make this happen.
And, you brought up a good point that I think, the areas that are going to need some clarification, probably starting with this next time we get together to really dive into that. Because that's one of the things we were here already, is like, what is the role of the county going to be? I mean, and what is the role of this group and the community going to be? And what's that balance look like? So I heard from this group, we need to get the community to do it. There's also some language we need the county to do it. So what's that balance? So, those are going to be areas that this group's going to need to clarify and doesn't mean it's all of one or all the other, or what's the balance. So that's definitely going to be an area for you all to start thinking about, is what is that balance between community actions and county actions? And the county, actually, I think there's going to be a time for this, and we're not going to dive deep into that conversation today because we've got 25 minutes to figure out a few things, but there's going to be a role for the county to come in and say, this is the resources we have to deal with it, and if we want to do more, what are we going to need? So I'm going to encourage this group to decide when to bring the county in too, to get clarification from them on what their role is going to be.
And I saw Nanda's hand, just
yeah.
if you want.
I was just saying, I agree with Susan that more people should be educated, and but it's not just educated once. All the at school I see we got educated last year about global warming, and we knew about it, but we need to be educated more and get more I'm just saying that maybe we should educate more and make it clear that it's a serious subject.
Thank you.
So,
Actually, I have
yeah.
nothing. When I was at a meeting with Peter Gang, he had passed out something about the different jurisdictions in Sonoma County, suggestions for them making a climate emergency declaration. And so I made copies of this because I think it's relevant for us to think about. So I was just going to pass these out. Because,
I
hold on a
would
second.
suggest they go to the clerk.
Okay.
Clerk.
Yeah.
And what I'm going to say is, one of the things we're going to start moving in, because we got to get you out by 5, is that we'll talk about what are some of the background documents, and these can be things you can be looking at and really developing relevant questions for the next time to come through. Because there's a lot of material here, and getting that focus is going to be, or foci, many focus. Focuses are foci, right? Of this group. So, yeah.
Do you see us aligning with other climate action counties, districts?
It's going to be up to you. I mean, again, it's going to be up to this group. This group gets to decide what it wants to do, and there's beauty in that and chaos in that too. So we're trying to help you get to a point where you can launch into some of that.
Can I ask a question? Are there any resources coming from the county in terms of staff to do anything, or is this completely
So I'll briefly, what we know, the county, I'll just lay it down, the county laid out $7,500 to get this group going. A piece of that is going to us to help facilitate some staffing, and then there's some staffing time. So it's basically going to be about staffing your meeting at this point. So that's going to be one of the things this group needs to decide is, hey, how do we keep this going as far as what are our staffing needs? Do we advocate for the county? Do we go by grant writing, a combination of between? Absolutely. Those are key things. So I wanted to just touch on really quickly, because this is coming up, 3E, this next piece. So I'm sorry, I should have done the public comment after the last piece.
Well, if you would give the opportunity now.
Public comment, I have to do with that after the expectations piece, but any public comment on the last one we've just been discussing?
Since you asked, John McCowan, I can't resist. So the Board of Supervisors, as of now, has decided that this group can function on $7,500 for the current fiscal year. One more meeting and you probably have run through that. There is an alternative proposal. I won't go into a lot of detail. There is a potential to align with the Mendocino County Resource Conservation District. There's a draft scope of services for that. There's a tentative budget of $110,000 for that. That fund would be used to hire not strictly staff for this committee, but a person who would function as the sustainability and climate action program manager for the county, and then would also help write grants and would also staff this committee with a portion of their time. So that's an alternate proposal, and at the appropriate time, the board has requested that this committee weigh in on what funding staffing model do you prefer. So that might be after the next workshop, but at some point you'll all have the opportunity to tell the Board of Supervisors what is your vision of how this committee should be staffed and funded.
So based on time, I'm gonna recommend, I think we're gonna need, because there's gonna be an action, I'd like to kind of move 3G and 3, did I get the letters right? G and, let's see if I got these right here, we're up to G and H.
3G.
Yeah, I'd like to move G and H next, because that's really where this group, before we run out of time, needs to get that, yes?
I'd suggest we need to come back to 3A as well.
Yeah,
3A?
the chairman.
Yeah, well, that's what I was gonna say, we do that right now, because
Yeah.
we're gonna have to make an action, this group's gonna have to decide on a calendar, which requires an action, which requires a chairperson, it's gonna say, I'm entertaining a motion to, at some point, that we have our next meeting at a certain time, and the group has to vote to agree on that. So, do you wanna, how do we get a chair? Just, again, we're looking for somebody to
So
be
we'll-
nominated as just to get us through the action.
We'll provide a motion by someone, and then a second, and then the committee will vote.
And that's
just
for
an interim
this
chair. not
interim
for
chair, so we
permanent.
can just take some action today.
Yes.
So, Academy, like that?
I'd like to make a motion to nominate Marie
Okay.
as the interim chair, because she's already been through this.
Okay.
I'll second.
Yeah.
Okay.
I was gonna say, she was-
And now, do we need to comment on this?
Yes.
Yes.
Any further discussion?
Any further
And I'm
discussion?
sorry, who made the second, please?
I did.
Thank you.
John?
Yeah, her name definitely rose up in terms of her skills.
Great.
for our meetings.
Great.
Does she wanna be?
Yeah.
Does she accept it? Sure, I'll do it.
Okay, so do we need to now call a vote on it?
Yeah,
or
we have public
Any
comment.
public comment on our interim chair being Marie?
All right.
Nope.
Seeing none.
None.
Okay, do we need to vote on that?
Yes.
I'll let you guys lead the vote. How's that go?
We need an interim chair to make that motion.
I know. All in favor
I
of
think
Marie?
the clerk can call
Yeah,
it.
clerk, go ahead.
I lost I gave my roster away. All right,
Someone throw her a roster.
yeah, but that's okay, I'm just gonna go around the room. I don't have the context and I apologize, I'm half blind. Raul Garcia? Yeah, that's a yes?
Yes.
Purple, yes. Shai Larson? Yes. John Anderson? Walter Smith? Javier Silva? Susan Sher?
Yes.
Kathy Monroe?
Yes.
Patrick Henschel?
Aye.
Marie Jones?
Abstain.
Sorry. This is far as I can see. Adam Lajowski?
Aye.
Alan Drout? Tessa Lynn Smith?
Yes.
Jennifer May?
Yes.
Jade Swarm?
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously.
Great.
All right.
Congratulations. Yeah.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Great. So, can we continue on? Do we need you?
No, I'm sorry, let me correct that for the record, please. Motion carries with,
One abstention.
one abstention, yes, my apologies.
So can we continue on until we need you?
Yes, please go ahead.
So we'd like to, just for the sake of time, based on where we are, is move to G, 3G, and 3H, which is really looking at what's gonna happen next and setting the next meeting, so which has to happen in this meeting by a vote, to have the next meeting. So we're proposing a 4-hour workshop. It's a lot to get everybody in the same room, and there's a lot of work to do, and so if we can kind of get together and have a real time to look at how this group wants to work together. What are the big goals you want to focus on, and some of the roles, and then reviewing some bylaws and prep for like an election of officers. You know, at a minimum, if we can do that in another meeting, you all really get a better sense of which direction you're going, how you're going to work together, and what your personal role might be in that. So with that's where we'd like to go. And then I want to move into actually having a meeting. So I'm going to open it up to comment. If this feels in the right direction, just some comment. We're not going to take an action on this piece. We're going to take an action on the next, which is the meeting. But we want to just hear this workshop. Yes.
I don't know what the order would be, but I would suggest that before we come back to a next meeting to take up this agenda, if that's what we decide to do, that we appoint a subcommittee to come up with some at least bylaws. I don't know about operating principles and goals and roles. Maybe goals and roles needs to be, not a subcommittee thing yet. And maybe not operating principles. I defer to those who know better. But I would suggest that maybe the bylaws group would
So
have a separate subcommittee.
one of the things that we were going to suggest, and we'll see if this works with council, is that if there are people that have experience with bylaws, I know the county says they have sample bylaws, situations like this, if those could be emailed out to people as sort of something to review and say, hey, we like this, and come back and have discussion about it, because there's a lot of bylaws out there and people have had experience, and the county has that, but could some samples go out to the group to review and then come back to the next meeting and have discussion about it and take action on it? Or versus a committee having to get together?
Yeah, what I'm suggesting is that bylaws are probably not that people aren't that passionate about them, they just want them to work. So I think a subcommittee of members who are willing to work with the county on those samples and put one, or maybe a couple together to present to the full committee might be a more efficient way of using our time at the next meeting.
Is there, and that would that be an ad hoc something to that?
Yeah, that would be an ad hoc, and the chair could certainly appoint an ad hoc if there are, if there's interest in volunteers.
Is anybody interested in volunteering on a bylaw ad hoc committee?
I would.
We have a
How many do we have
You
to
have
have?
that one too.
Great.
So it looks like we have 2 committees. I'd like to appoint Tess Alvin Smith and, Ellen Drell as an ad hoc committee to develop bylaws for the group. See, I know how to do this.
Pleasure.
Great. Any further? Yes.
Can I ask just for clarification on that, is there a direction as to when we expect the bylaws will come back, or is there?
Given the holidays, let's just assume January.
Yeah.
I think that's fair, that you guys could come back with a recommendation. And I would personally recommend that you start with something that exists, like the counties, and let's not go crazy, like take out something that you think is nuts, but otherwise.
Great. So that would come back to this workshop for the recommendations and discussion and some action.
And I'd like to suggest that for the proposed agenda, that we also get into the meat of our work and actually start talking about what types of focus groups we want to form and who wants to be on them. Because I think that if we sit around and talk about what we're going to talk about, we're all going to get really frustrated.
Yeah.
Yep.
I'd like to add that to the proposed agenda.
And I would just say this is a very general, but that was the intention of this goals part, like what are we actually going to do?
Okay.
How people are going to play in that role, yes.
Just on that vein, maybe it's, maybe a further explanation, that we can get maybe as part of the agenda for the next time. Same thing with operating principles. What do you mean by that?
Right.
So that people come with some idea of what we're going to actually talk about in this more in specific. Right?
Great.
Yeah, and I like the idea that Mary's come up with, talking about goals and roles, and this is what we mean by that. We're going to look at who's going to be on focus groups and blah, 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 blah.
Great, thank you. John, next person.
Yeah, I like the idea of coming to the next meeting with prepared material, so
Okay.
we can evaluate material. To that end, I think that would it be useful to have a proposal of the subcommittees that we'd like to form be presented to the group at that point instead, so that we can bring an idea of what the subcommittees might look like.
So-
I know that they've been referred to as something
So
else.
I'm gonna go back, even though this is another agenda item, but you all have this in your board packet, so I'm not gonna discuss it. I just wanna let you know that all of these things that were presented to you that you have recommendations for focus groups in them already. And so one of the intentions is to kind of people develop, really look at that, because a lot of work went in from some of the community members and the board in concept adopted that, but it doesn't mean you can't change it, is to look at those documents, those 3 documents that are in your packet and came to you by email, to really do some research and come up with some real relevant questions regarding that. So when you do arrive, you say, hey, this are the proposed focus groups, or does this feel right, et cetera, et cetera. So there, you do have a lot of material that a lot of community members spend a lot of time putting forward as a starting point. It doesn't mean it has to change or not, but that's where it's at. Is that kind of what you were referring to?
Sure,
So-
but that wasn't on the agenda then, is a review of that and formation of those.
Right, sorry, we did jump ahead, and that was my fault, because I got worried about time, and I want to get our next meeting done in our chair. And yes, did you have a comment, Carla? Yes.
Just a quick thank you for the bylaws committee, and I just wanted to second what Walter and I believe John said just about reflecting in the bylaws more clarification. I don't know if this is the appropriate way to do it, but since we're all together, the juxtaposition between the focus groups and the Brown Act, and how we can have as much leniency as we can with the focus groups.
Okay, yes.
And as, we live in a very spread out county. And
You can say divided. We feel it.
I live in Boonville and I can't even go to Girl Scout meetings, it's crazy.
Right.
But, so, this may be crazy, but is there some way to do synchronous meetings online, or,
So
I'm gonna just throw it out there.
If I can address this very briefly, and it's Brown Act, my understanding is that if there is teleconferencing options, we don't want to do that for the next one. The more we can do in person, but it requires that you are in a space that's accessible to the public, and the public can come and it's noted ahead of time. So it's almost the same thing. You might be sitting by yourself
And
with a computer.
ADA accessible.
ADA accessible.
But these might be something we need to focus
Yeah.
on is, let's find a community space in
Right.
every community that is that space.
Right.
Like, I can tell you right now, the adult school in Anderson Valley would work perfectly.
Those will be some of the logistics we can hit on the next meeting for sure. So
Yeah.
good point, absolutely. That was one of our first questions too, is like, how do we reduce people driving fossil fuels all over the county to meet each other? It's important we're in person together.
You just take
as
a
a whole
helicopter to
group.
get here instead.
Yeah, you know, at least at the beginning, but there's gonna be times when it's like, do we really all need to drive all the way to one spot? So, with those inputs, thank you very much, and they're affirming the direction we wanted to go. Any public comment before we move to actually scheduling the next meeting?
So,
Yes.
Mark Jensen, Fort Bragg. I've done a lot of this stuff in the past. My suggestion to you guys is find one thing that you can get a ribbon cutting on or a win quickly, fast, and that will help get the momentum going. So I really encourage you guys to find at least one thing that you can get done next year or this year.
Great.
We have a meeting.
Okay, so, moving on to H. I want you to pull out your calendars, and we've got a little process here, so you're gonna get up and actually do something, 'cause it's hard to get all these people. We're proposing two different weeks, January, the first week of January, just one of these, because this is when we're available, so we're gonna write it. So, it's either gonna be on the week of January 6th to the 10th, any of those days from 9 to 1, yes?
I'm sorry, can we go back? Is that all right, Madam Chair, to
Move on.
3G?
Oh, yeah, sorry, you're in.
Yeah, no, I think that's fine.
Thank you.
One of the things
Chair.
I'd like to encourage us to do when we think about the next meeting is, since 2/3 of us are from the coast and 2/5 and 3/5 are from the inland, that we might consider, unlike most committees that always happen in Ukiah, actually have some meetings on the coast, and I would like to suggest that at least 2/5 of the meetings happen on the coast for fairness.
Absolutely. Yes, Al.
I need to back up for a minute because I must have missed a sentence or something, because in that agenda for the next meeting, what did we decide was going to be somewhat dealt with before we meet again? I mean, we set up the ad hoc bylaws committee, but what did we do with operating procedures, I guess, and goals and
So the consultants are going to put together some ideas of what they think good communication styles should be, or operating procedures, I
Or a
assume.
process for you to say what you want.
That's what you mean by operating?
Yes, it means how you all want it, yes.
And I would ask, I'm a little unclear myself, so which is why I asked if we could go back. I just, in terms of, because there's gonna have to be an agenda.
Yep.
And the clerk of the board is gonna have to publish the agenda. So, right now, this body hasn't formed any bylaws. So the rules as to how exactly things get selected for the agenda have not yet been decided upon. So I believe it would be just very helpful to have some very clear direction as to what is going to be going on that agenda, or whether that's simply going to be at the discretion of the chair, or.
Can we go back to the agenda and can I make a few suggestions about?
And I just want to make a yes, and if we have to end this meeting in 6 minutes, we still have to determine a calendar date, so I just want to be really clear.
Meetings can go over.
No,
Can-
not
no.
this one.
Really?
No.
We don't have this, okay.
No.
Can you do the calendar search online
No.
tomorrow?
No, we can't, we have to do it as a group, that's why we're trying to, sorry.
So for
So rules of the road.
operating principles, I assume we would probably use Robert's Rules of Order for this committee, so there's probably not a lot beyond that.
Our intention is really how you want to communicate to each other, what are your expectations of each other, of commitments, of accountability? Like, what does it mean to work in this group together? What do we all have the same expectations of that? So it's a little bit more of that. It's not the bylaws and Robert's rules are one thing. This is more like, let's really talk about what it means that we're working together. It's not gonna be a lot, but really it's key kind of how we work together.
So is that
That's our
facilitated
intention.
conversation by you all with us?
We would lead that, and you would sort of say, this is. if
So
we're
the
gonna-
agenda item would be a facilitated conversation on communication strategies and operating principles for the committee.
Okay, and then I would just suggest, if the committee would authorize the chair to make any adjustments of language.
As we move along.
Yeah.
Great.
And then goals and roles, we'd want to add to that designation of our focus groups, areas of interest for focus groups, and maybe people actually developing into focus groups or assignments to focus groups.
It would be clarification too of those foundation documents that came, because a lot of work, so it's like, people might be saying, is this clarification, are these the same roles we have and the same roles we want? So using that as a background. And the bylaws.
And then the bylaws will be a presentation by the ad hoc committee about what you recommend.
Yeah, the bulk of the work is really gonna be around this goals and roles.
That won't be until January, so you have plenty of time.
Yes. With 4 minutes to go. I'm just saying, 4 minutes to go, and we have to be out of here and make it.
All right, we're going to the calendar.
Yes.
So how issues get decided on and moved forward, is that going to be part of the operating?
Yes. Yeah, so in general, it's majority vote rule, these kinds of committees.
We'll have that. That'll be, yeah, so
Why
there's a
don't we
lot
hold
of
questions
logistics,
until after you
there's a
make
lot of
your
logistics that have to be figured out in this group. And based on the fact that this is a kind of getting the group going, and we only have 2 hours, we understand that, and that's why we want to do a 4-hour where it's like, let's really, you can do some research on, you can go through that PowerPoint on Robert's rules, you can look at these background documents for the next one, you know who each other are, and really come and like
So
dive
can I
in.
make a suggestion that we move to the next slide and just have a show of hands for who's available for each of these dates? And
We actually
whichever
have an
one-
easier process if we may.
Show of hands? is
Well, there's 10 days, 10 different days, so it's kind of with 2 different time frames of each day,
Okay,
so.
all right.
So this is what we hope you do. Look at your calendars, and if you cannot do, this is a 3-minute process. Maybe this will work. I don't know if the show of hands, we're running out of time. Do you want to chair? Go, you want to give it a try?
Show of hands?
Yes.
Can you remove any Tuesdays from consideration?
Okay, Tuesdays out.
Okay.
Okay. Let's start with, yes.
We also have some people who aren't here.
One person?
One person.
Only one person?
Yeah. So,
Yeah,
okay.
and that's Michael Potts, and he's, can't come if it's to 5, because he doesn't want to drive at night.
Okay,
We should just cross off all the 1 to 5.
Let's hold off that. It's a potential cross off for 1 to 5.
Or if it-
We could go 12 to 4.
We could do
if we
12
need.
to 4.
Let's start with the morning. Okay, look at your calendars. Can everybody do Monday, January 6th, 9 to 1? Hands up if you can do it. If I don't see everybody's hand up, we're moving on. Okay, I see a couple that can't do it. We're moving on. Wednesday, January 8th, 9 to 1. Can everybody do Wednesday, January 8th?
That's worse.
Okay.
Not everyone's ready.
How about 12 to 4 on Wednesday, January 8th? 12 to 4. 12 to 4. 12 to 4,
Not
January 8th.
everyone.
Wait, does Shay know?
No.
Okay, sorry, let's keep going. Yeah, let's go Thursday, 9 to 1. Thursday, 9 to 1.
What's the date?
This is the 9th, Thursday. Okay, no? Can't do it. How about 12 to 4 on Thursday, January 9th? No? Okay, let's keep moving. Friday, January 10th, 9 to 1. Friday, January 10th, 9 to 1. No?
But
No January.
can't do January.
Are you guys
Can't
do
do
January?
January.
I'm out.
Okay, well, let's go. Let's jump to February. Let's jump to February. February 3rd, Monday, 9 to 1. Okay, hands up if you can do it. Everybody, no? Out? Is anybody out that whole week where we should stop this conversation? So, all right, so we're at a place now. Now, we need a quorum. We have to do this. We need a quorum, but it's obviously we'd like everybody here. These are key things, but you are also going to be together for a full, year to 3 years. So how do you want to handle this in the last few minutes?
I feel like it'd be more helpful to say who cannot come, because
That's what
that's
we're
gonna, no, you're saying who can come.
Well, we were originally going to do that, but
Everybody's
we're already down the line,
Let's
so.
do a Google, the poll.
You can't
the
do
poll.
We have to do it. We
No.
can't do it, Rob, with the
Wasn't
Brown
January
Act.
10th like where most people could come?
It was.
Should we go back to January 10th?
There's only one
Who was
person.
out on January 10th?
I'm out till the 11th.
Okay, so we had 2 people out.
And why, can we do it the following week?
Well, we can't do it,
I'm
but
out
if you
till,
can.
including me. Sorry.
So,
I think it's gonna be hard to find a date that works for everybody.
mm-hmm.
That's not always easy.
Could it be recorded? Is that possible?
Yeah,
Or at
it's
least for-
recorded, correct?
I don't know if the future meetings will be live streamed and recorded or not.
But we
We'll
could
have
for the
to-
next one? Could we
I
work
can't
to
commit
do
to
that?
that yet, we have to get direction because there's a cost involved with
So
it.
I'd like to suggest that we just go ahead and go with January 10th, because waiting a whole next extra month for the possibility of maybe having some people come, but then maybe we can't make it.
Some people cannot do February, right? Is that right?
Yeah.
It's a lot harder when school starts for me personally, because I'm a teacher and my kids in school. So,
Well, let's ask the two folks that would not be able to do January 10th. Would you be willing, even if the county didn't, are we allowed to record it though with on our own equipment?
Yes, yes.
So we could record it if the county doesn't,
You're actually required to audio record.
I'm out of the country, sorry.
It's the same with me. So either I'll try to live stream in wherever I am, if that's available. Otherwise, I'll listen to a recording and just catch up.
And is that okay? I mean, it's not ideal, but is it okay?
Of course, we've got to get this thing moving.
We'll give you notes too.
If I'm the only one, don't.
So,
We'll work
Chair,
together.
Chair, we need, this is an action, so.
So I'd like to, well, we actually need a motion from the floor.
I'll move that our next meeting be January 10th from, what was the time?
9 to 1?
9 to 1.
And I'd like a second, is there a second?
Can we do 1 to 5 if everyone doesn't care later in the days? Okay.
12 to
Or
4.
12 to 4.
12 to
12 to
4.
4. 12 to 4 sounds
Is
good.
12
I
to
would
4?
be happy to amend my motion.
12 to 4, anybody can't do it in addition to the two original?
Well, let's sure.
So can we have a second for the 12 to 4?
Second.
All right, can we have a vote? Clerk? Sorry, I don't know the clerk's name.
It's
Carla.
Carla, sorry Carla.
That's all right. How about just raise your hand if you're in opposition to it, so we don't have to walk around the whole room. All in favor, raise your hand. Anybody abstaining? Anybody objecting?
You have to
I meant, sorry, I'm in favor.
Okay, who else abstained then, I'm sorry?
Oh, abstain.
And I'm sorry, your
Tess.
name?
Tess. Just to make it interesting.
I don't really have.
So the motion carries with 1 abstention. Okay.
So we obviously, and I think everybody else here would like to, continue to sort of wrap things in a more, but do we need to adjourn now? It's after 5?
We'll meet in December.
So Chair, you're in charge of the finishing of.
All right, well, I'd like to thank you all for being here, and I close the meeting at 5:03.
Can I ask a question? Is that our next meeting, or is that just a workshop?
That's the next, it is the next time this group as a whole is gonna gather and really dive in. 12 to 4.